Hello, everyone. Today is January 20th, 2022. This is the Cluster API Provider Azure office hours. If you don't have access to this meeting, to the document, you can get access by joining the SIG Cluster Lifecycle mailing list. And please note that we follow this NCF Code of Conduct. If you have anything to say, please raise your hand instead of interrupting. And if you have any questions or any topics you want to discuss, feel free to add them to the agenda under open discussion. That being said, do we have anyone new here who hasn't been here before and wants to say hi? All right, I don't think so. So let's keep going. And okay, so first things off. So we discussed last time we met about how we wanted to check in to see if this was still the best time for us to hold office hours. Just as a kind of way to make sure that we're still, being inclusive, and since like people's priorities change and a lot of new people have started contributing to the project. So I started a doodle poll last week and shared it on Slack and everywhere possible. I did get a good amount of response. So surprisingly, well, not surprisingly, I guess, but the most popular vote was actually this current time. We got 12 votes for this time. So the only thing is so there are 12 votes here. 3 of them are, if need be. There was one that was 10 votes that only had 1 if need be, but besides that, it's pretty close. I think unfortunately, the way I see it, there are 2 groups of people in this poll. There's the Europe folks and the West Coast folks. And I think the West Coast folks heavily prefer like later in the morning, and then the Europe folks prefer earlier in the day for them. So I don't think there's a good way of satisfying everyone. I don't know if anyone here, like maintainers or anyone, has any opinions on what we should do.
We could try the other time and see how it works out as a trial thing. Although obviously this time 1 in terms of raw votes. But we should give you a break and not make you get up so early every Thursday. Was the goal here?
It's all good. I don't mind.
Yeah.
It's mostly for others who have families and can't join. But I think so. One thing that we could do is keep this time as office hours, which obviously we use to like do PSAs and open Q&A. So like more for like users focused. So if users come in and they have questions, this is where we answer them. And kind of like on an as needed basis. So if no one has questions, no agenda items are added, we don't hold it, or we have a short meeting. And then we could do, I think someone proposed in another meeting I was in, having, I think the SIG Windows folks do this, having some sort of like after hours, which is kind of like, let's like hack together, pair on stuff, work, like have a just more free-form meeting where we don't record it. And it's kind of like a open space for any contributor to like ask questions or get help. So this one's more developer focused, not as like, user focused, but we could try to do that in the second most popular time, just to like give everyone a chance to have like a face-to-face with the maintainers and see how that works out. What do people think? Matt?
I'm trying to raise my hand now. I think that'd be great if we feel like we, and when I say we, I mostly mean you, have enough energy to do something like that. I really think, I think there's a lot of people who might join that might not come to this meeting. And even if it does end up just being us, this group that's here, I think it'd be super valuable to say, to dig into some code or talk without being recorded or whatever. Not that we feel like we're really restricted here, but having a different style of meeting, I think if we have the bandwidth for it, I think it'd be great.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, just to like answer on the if you have energy thing, I would hope if we do this that, I wouldn't be like leading the meeting. That's the point, right? Like it would be more like free form, like anyone who wants to take the stage can go for it. And like we would kind of share like who kind of helps out. And yeah, Christian.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to say that I feel like personally, this is more valuable for developers that are trying to onboard the project somehow. So engineers like you, super skilled and super deep into the code, maybe wouldn't find it very useful, but for a newcomer such as myself, that I'm trying to to start helping a little bit with the project, yeah, pairing with some of you would be super nice, maybe on some specific issues. But I would probably do it on demand rather than having, a specified time slot for this. Not sure. But maybe we should just make it clear on Slack that there is this opportunity, and yeah, make it on demand maybe. But anyway, open to any idea. I just wanted to give my 2 cents.
Fair. Yeah, I think I disagree that it wouldn't be valuable to me or others like that have been there for a while. I think it's always nice to pair with people and get second opinions and stuff you're working on, even if you know what you're doing a little bit. There's also a lot of times you don't know what you're doing and you have questions. So it wouldn't be just like, let's help, new contributors on board. It would also be for experienced contributors to share ideas and just like brainstorm together on some things. Okay, so let's, does anyone else have any other opinions?
Pardon me. I think it's more likely to succeed if we give it a fixed time, but then we could allow it to either happen or not. Like if no one signs up, then we just don't have it. But I think stuff like that tends to work better if everybody knows, oh, it's going to happen on Tuesdays or something.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we could do it, maybe we could alternate weeks or something. Like if we do this every 2 weeks, then the off week is that meeting.
All right. Yeah, that sounds good. Okay, so let's see. For now, I won't call it a consensus or anything, just because we are in this synchronous form of meeting where some people can't be here. So I'll try to post about this in Slack and allow other people to chime in, but I think it's looking like we might keep the current time for office hours just because that's the most popular. And then try to see if we can have some sort of alternate form of meeting for people who can't be at office hours to also be able to interact with like other contributors of CABZ. All right, cool. Next topic. So I actually added that on behalf of Shyam, but we were trying to get some feedback in his PR about the Azure cluster like comment types on the naming of the struct, and haven't really been successful so far at hearing back from anyone. So hoping to see if anyone has any opinions in this meeting. But basically the idea is we're gonna refactor some of the structs because we want to add some like to support cluster class, we need to add a Azure cluster template struct, and that is going to, or Azure cluster template CRD, sorry, and that is going to be sharing a lot of the fields from Azure cluster, but unfortunately not all of them. So we can't just put Azure cluster spec in there. And the reason is there are some fields in Azure cluster spec which need to be unique per cluster. For example, resource group name or VNet name. It doesn't really make sense to share that across clusters. So what we're trying to do is, instead of having two, CRDs that are basically copies of each other with a lot of duplicate fields, which would be hard to maintain long term. We're trying to refactor some of the common fields, like the one that can be shared, into a struct, and then use that struct embedded in both CRDs spec. So the question is, how do we name the structs that are like the shared factor? And I think, Sham, what are the current options?
So I first named it as like I suffixed everything with common. As you can see, like network, the common specs of network, I've just like added the common suffix and called it network common. And then we had a discussion in CAPI office hours, I think a couple of weeks earlier, and there's not like there's no prior art that exactly does what we're trying to do, but something similar came up in the guest book example that Cecile had posted. And so the final, not the final conclusion, like the conclusion that myself and Cecile like agreed to was to add common prefix instead of a suffix. So it'll be like common network or common Azure cluster. Yeah, so that's where we are at right now. Any feedback is like appreciated.
And I think, Cheyenne, we should probably do a lazy consensus on this, since we agree on something. If no one else pitches in or has opinions by, end of this week, I don't think you should keep this held forever. It's been 2 weeks, so we need to move on at some point.
Yeah, I really would like to have more feedback, because it's kind of like important goal that I'm like trying to touch on. So it'd be great if we can have more eyes on it before it get merged.
For sure, yeah. David says he'll take a look today. Thank you, David.
Thanks, David.
And yeah, if anyone else has feedback, please share. It might be good to also get feedback from Cluster API folks, since they might follow the same direction eventually. With like, because right now the cluster class stuff, there's some CRDs in Cluster API that have done the like duplicating fields thing, and I think that might be something we want to reconsider and instead do something similar to this. So, okay. Let's move on. Before we jump into that last one, did anyone have any other topics? Like, let's just open it for open Q&A or anything. Anything anyone want to share? Anything interesting going on?
Yeah, like I just wanted to ask, like, if there are like few PRs that are open for the managed clusters, if we can get like some eyes on them, basically, so like we can get those in. And also, like, what would the place where we can actually discuss about, I have a few questions around the managed cluster, how we develop features around them, right? So there have been like few approaches that we have been just exposing the API as it comes. But there are like other approaches, let's say like for cluster autoscaler, we can go and install cluster autoscaler like Cluster API does. For others, or for the self-managed. But in this case, we just went and opened the AKS solution for cluster autoscaling, right? That's managed by the AKS team. The same goes for the GPU. Now we have a question around that. If we just enable the feature, or we really go and want to install the daemon set for like NVIDIA operator to handle that, right? So that's like somehow like principles, like guiding principles on how we approach that. And I feel like it would be better if we just use the AKS, but I would like to have a discussion around that so if what would be the gains from the one approach or another approach, right? And yeah, that's it. If someone has, I don't know if this is the right place, or we can discuss it later offline also.
Yeah, this is definitely the right place for these kinds of discussions. The only thing is, I think the people you were talking to on that issue about it before, Ace and Jack, they're both not here because they're West Coast and it's a tad early for them. So they won't be able to weigh in, but we can talk about it and maybe like summarize the discussion we had on the issue and see if others have thoughts. About the first point on getting eyes, I'll try my best to take a look at those. And if anyone else has time, please take a look. We've been a little low on reviewers lately, and we're getting a lot more PRs, which is great, but also having a hard time keeping up with the reviews. It might take a bit longer than usual, but going to try to get there as soon as possible. But yeah, thank you for all the PRs. They're really great. Okay, so about add-ons, do you want to talk about it now or?
Yeah, I think if someone is interested, then we can talk. Otherwise, like I can take it offline. Yeah. Okay. I will just start the topic. I think like if I don't get answer, we will move it offline. So basically, it's like these are the features that we are trying to add to the AKS like through CAPC, right? So there are like many ways to solve the same feature that is in the documentation from the AKS also, right? So AKS provides, let's say, example of the GPU is like if I just enable right a header from custom header, I won't see actually when this diamond set is running from the user perspective, right? So that is managed by the AKS in the master's nodes or like outside the user workload. And I don't even see the logs. I don't see like much to debug there. And if some issue is happening, like all we need to do is like open a support ticket to the AKS, right? Like something is going wrong on that. But then there's the other path where like for more advanced users, it's like, yeah, they really want to see what's going on with their like NVIDIA operator or diamond set, check the logs. And so get more details around if something is missing or how they can fix that. And they don't go down the path of the support, right? The AKS support team. And these are like two different ways to enable, right? Paths. So I think like here, as we are providing an API, an opinionated API to run AKS, the question is like, what would be the path we should go like by default, right? So my thoughts on that is like, if I'm an advanced user, right, and I want to really go and to check the logs of my NVIDIA operator, I can already actually go beyond like cluster API and go and install ahead that operator myself, right? So we don't need like cluster API to enable me and give me a path to install that custom installation. But if I'm using like as a user to like democratize the usage of the Kubernetes cluster and want to get it up and running through AKS, probably I'm already good enough with the provided options by the AKS. And we can provide that and always like guide them how to go on the custom paths, right? Like there's always a possibility, so we are not closing it down. But these are like my thoughts. I would like to hear if someone has any different opinion on like how we can go different ways.
Anyone have thoughts on this? David?
So I'm hoping to get a little clarity here. So are we talking about, Zane, are you putting out the question of how do we represent the two different paths in the API?
No, actually like how we implement them, right? So it's more about like, for example, the GPU case, we can just send a header to AKS Azure API to enable the GPU node pools, or we can actually go and install a diamond set, right?
Indeed.
Yeah. So question is like how the API, of course, we will agree on that, like how we represent that API, but the underlying implementation, should it go down the path of the headers and just delegate to Azure everything, or should we go down the path of, right, like you need a config map and where is the diamond set definition and we will install that diamond set for you, right? That is the EKS is doing right now, for example.
Right. So I was making the assumption already that we would have both possibilities there. So you would have like, here's the AKS supported add-on approach where it's like you said the custom headers added to the request. and also for the same way we do it for GPU nodes in regular IaaS. It becomes really weird if you think about you're exposing both of them in the API, right? So if you start thinking about, hey, I'm going to leave it open to AKS. I'm going to also provide the shortcut to say, hey, we're going to use the NVIDIA operator and throw the stuff out there. It's kind of confusing to a user. It's like, well, which one's the right way, and why do I do this? I don't know. Anybody have any thoughts on that?
I don't think exposing both is the right way. I don't think that's what Zane was suggesting. I think what we do is we expose the AKS like built-in recommended approach of just turning it on via the AKS API. And then if you're an advanced user and you know your way around and you know that's not what you want, you can go around that and install your own operator. But we're not making it easy for people to like go the custom route, which I think is okay. I think like probably that's not what AKS recommends. What I'm guessing, like especially for GPU right now, we're taking that example, which is at a stage where it's still a feature flag because you have to enable it in the custom headers. So it's not really like a first class like feature yet, I guess. But once it's like part of the AKS APIs and SDK, then it probably doesn't make sense to not use that as the primary route, right? James?
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I think my gut tells me that we should be using AKS, and then an advanced user who knows what they're doing and is coming to the table with that idea that they want full control. They would know enough to be able to install those extra daemon sets over the top and be able to control them all themselves. So I think I'm leaning in that direction as well.
David, did you want to say anything else?
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to raise my hand just so didn't stomp on anybody. Thank you for recognizing me. Yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense. I would personally much prefer that from a user's standpoint. You have one easy path, and then you can do it yourself. I think this also kind of brings up something that we have discussed in side conversations about add-ons, about setting up a cluster so it's easy to add other things. Or what things do we add to the basic cluster? Like we add stuff with like cluster resource sets, but what stuff should come with a cluster? And this is add-ons beyond this. I don't want to distract from this conversation just yet, but I would love to hear what other people think about how we can easily add other stuff to the cluster, like I don't know, upgrading CNI is kind of ugly right now. You put it in with cluster resource set, but how do you go add that on? How do you go and upgrade it? And it's not something we really touch in cluster API. I'm just curious what folks think. But we should probably finish the discussion on AKS and GPU nodes. I'm sorry to digress.
No worries. I think we're, Christian?
Yeah, I just wanted to give our point of view as Kubernetes as a service providers. I think it all goes down to how you define a cluster. Because if you ask me, a cluster is a bare bone cluster, possibly without even a CNI, because I want this blank sheet where I want to paint my cluster as I want it, right? And of course, we are advanced users. But I can see the other side of the spectrum where basic users just wants a cluster that works. And so they want the CNI to be there, and they want possibly other things to be there in order for the cluster to work properly, right? So I guess we should come to a definition of what a cluster is for us. And then we can discuss how to provision everything needed for that vision to become reality.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point of view. I'm sure you're not the only one that sees it this way. So yeah, I think it's important to keep AKS separate though, because AKS clusters are their own thing, right? So using Cluster API to manage their lifecycle, but it is a managed service. So I think people expect to have the features of the managed service exposed to them. But so Zane, it sounds like we have sort of a consensus here, which is we should go the AKS route and then allow people to go the custom route themselves if they need to. So does that help answer your questions? Yeah.
Yes, definitely. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. About the add-ons thing, yeah, I think that's it's more of a scope question where like, are we enabling self-managed clusters like infrastructure to be built, and then it's up to whoever is consuming them to take that and turn it into a full-fledged cluster with everything installed on top? Or are we building it like ecosystem where it's like, this is like what the best practices are, this is what we recommend installing, and we guide the user down the path of success? Yeah, I could see arguments for both. Yeah, David.
Yeah, to add to that just a little bit, like the example of CNI, you know, it's, if there was a way that we could say add another cluster resource set and it then updated the CNI and everything worked out well, right? Just like a package manager or something. It wouldn't be so disjointed. It's just when we use stuff that just, you know, install stuff into the cluster on first run, it's basically like first running and goodbye, which is, you know, antithetical to what Cluster API is about. Cluster API is about day two activities, right? We can easily stand up a cluster. It's just how do you maintain a cluster going forward? You know, that's kind of the tough part. So like, and it could be just documentation of like, hey, go install like OLM or something, and you know, have your operator package manager or something that does this kind of stuff, or you know, advise people. It feels like we're starting people off, and we advance them past their knowledge a little bit with like cluster resource set. Whereas if like somebody started off with like the bare cluster and just said, okay, go apply this Helm chart, go apply this, and you know, it's a little bit more piecewise, because we're trying to jumpstart people so it works and it runs quick, and that's awesome. It's just you end up in, I don't know, you have differing objectives, you have different strategies.
To be fair, the quick start instructions don't use cluster resource set. They literally tell people to go and do kubectl apply with the Calico manifest. So cluster resource set is there if you come to know about it, but it's not like put in the first cluster that people build.
That might be even worse. Here's this random chart to apply. Have at it.
Christian?
I was thinking that maybe this is a discussion for general copy, right? Because all the things that we discussed, such as CNI and all the things, are really not Azure specific. Do you know if there is any discussion in copy about this?
There have been. I think it would be a good time to bring it back. I know there was a discussion about enabling out-of-tree CSI drivers, as those are becoming out-of-tree by default. And we're basically required to install them. And Cabby said infrastructure providers install out-of-tree CSI drivers, and we don't have a good way to do that. So it's kind of like, okay, well, what do we do? So I think we should definitely bring it up in the CAPI, either office hours or issue. That's a good point. All right. Does anyone else have any other topics or any questions?
I had like another topic, but that will be a quick one. So
Go for it.
We have been like, for example, using CAPC for our clusters, and there were like few things that I wanted to ask around the scope of the CAPC. So what we do is like, for example, is the giving the permissions, let's say for ACR, right? So we need like the kubelet identity, and we create like a role assignment for that. And that is like, we are doing it outside CAPC actually, right? So we are like, have like a companion operator that is basically building that up. And because we were not so 100% sure if we can, if the right scope for that will be inside CAPC. But now again, like we are finding another issue that is basically we were not giving all the contributor permissions to our AKS cluster, right? So we are giving like really restricted access. And we found out like, let's say just to create a service, when it's creating a load balancer on Azure, it's not enough our permissions, right? So we have to again give to the AKS principal ID, again, some permission. That's again another role assignment to another object. So now we have like two use cases where to different objects, we are giving like role assignments for related to AKS. And I just wanted to ask if how do we feel about like bringing those features or those inside the scope of that, because it's true that it's not really related to AKS, right? But at the same point, like, for example, we are really creating objects that are outside a cluster scope, let's say VNets or resource groups or other things that are more like cloud related. So yeah, that was the question, like, how do we feel about like bringing those inside? Role assignments, basically. Yeah.
David?
So I think we do create some role assignments for what are they, for the managed identities, right? So we do some of that. We had talked at some point about having custom roles. So you can create in Azure RBAC, you can create these custom roles where you give them a specific set of rights, and a identity can belong to that custom role. And I believe last time I checked, last time I looked at Kappa, when they spin up a stack, they do a similar thing. So they set up some custom role assignments or custom IAM sets of rights, and then associate those two identities. I think this makes sense. We've just stayed away from it because you have like, we always break it down to like two different identities. You have one identity that is a security identity, like your CSO's office. And then you have like the developers, and breaking them up, you have like two clear boundaries where one of them builds those identities or builds those roles and then creates the assignment. And the other is like building clusters that use the identities with the roles. I think we just need to figure out how that flow works so that, it's, I don't know, enterprisey enough for everybody. Because I think we can do it, and we can make it a heck of a lot easier. It also comes down to what rights the operator has as it's running. So do you want the operator to have like super duper powerful rights, or do we make like some tools that make it easier for the command line to just go, hey, CSO, go run this, and here's my identity that I want you to go, privilege. I don't know, totally open to ideas. Let's make this easier.
The part I'm confused about is, Zane, you're talking about AKS clusters, right? Like you're using Azure managed clusters.
Yes.
So the managed identity stuff we have, that's for self-managed VMs, right? Is there some sort, or was that added to AKS? is there a feature in AKS that does this? Like, is this just about exposing an AKS feature in the CABZ API, or is this about building something around AKS?
Yeah,
Go ahead,
I think
Zig.
like, yeah. This is from our perspective, it's more about like in Azure cloud, like everything has like object IDs, right? And we want to give permissions to other objects to have like access to that, right? So for ACR point of view, it's just an object, and we are giving access from certain principal IDs to be able to authenticate and get access to those one. In this case, for example, we are using the managed system identity, and that will generate a principal ID for each cluster, and then also for the kubelet identities. And these are two different actually object IDs. So coming from that perspective, it's just a role assignment that we are creating that is like have certain privileges. We don't have a way to actually like do that like other than that right now. Or I did not found a way like to be able to like, let's say, give it to, unless we give, as David said, like super privileges to the cluster, then yes, of course, we have every access and we can do whatever we feel like. But in our case, like we want it more restricted access, like if AKS can do certain things and not, right? And we want to really vet the list of all the privileges that it has. And even if it means the ACR pull permissions, right? So we want to give it like really whitelisted that it can create load balancer, it can create like a pull the from certain registry, and that's it, not more.
So is that identity created before you create the AKS cluster, or after, or at time?
After.
Okay.
Like, yeah.
Got it. Okay. David, did you find anything on the AKS docs for this?
So if it's made afterward, that means are you using pod identity with that ID? Pardon me, with that identity? Please explain the workflow.
Yeah. So let's say like we create a AKS cluster from CAPZ or not, right? So we just create a AKS managed cluster, and we will get a principal ID that is associated to that cluster, right? In the JSON. We use later, we just go ahead outside CAPZ, of course. We know our like container registry that we have created, or like, for example, in this case, like for container registry, actually example is the kubelet identity, right? So that is another object ID that is not the AKS principal ID. We just assign the ACR pull permissions to be to that kubelet identity outside CAPZ ecosystem. Later, for example, when the AKS cluster is creating load balancer, it was failing because it doesn't have privileges to create a load balancer. In that case, we take the AKS principal ID that is being like created after the AKS cluster is created, and give it more privileges so it can do more, like had more access specifically to create load balancer in that sense. I guess the second one probably is we can do it like when we are creating that, but I think like about the kubelet identity, I didn't find any alternative for that. Yeah.
For ACR specifically, I think there's an integration where you can specify like I don't know if I can find docs for it, but there's a way to, like, I know you can do it for self-managed, and I'm pretty sure you can do it for AKS too. Oh, this. Attach ACR.
Yeah. Yes.
Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, but this is what we are doing in an automated way, right? So like question is like if we include this into CAPZ.
Right,
This
but if
feature.
it's an AKS feature, then yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with integrating it in CABZ. If there's a CLI flag, there's probably an SDK equivalent, right, that we can expose. I would be more concerned if this was not an existing AKS feature and we're saying, let's build this feature from scratch in CABZ, right? But that's just my 2 cents. Sorry, David, were you gonna say something?
No, I was just trying to get to that URI and see that where that started from. So it started from AZ AKS create. So they're probably in the create call, then using that resource ID to then set up the rights for that principle that they're making. That makes sense, and I imagine that that's something that we should be able to expose, and we should be able to expose on the managed cluster itself. So maybe a list of the ACR instances that you have access to, maybe something along those lines. I haven't seen it on the API. I'm sure that there's something in there, and worst comes to worst, we can always just run like debug and see what the AZ CLI is actually calling the HTTP calls that are involved. Yeah, so the ACR group, like that should be like super simple. Like we should be able to do that. That makes a ton of sense. And that means that the identity that you're using to create that cluster, or the identity that the operator is running under, has access to be able to do that. So that access is already assumed. You couldn't use that to elevate privileges, right? All right.
Well, maybe an issue is the right next step for this in describing the use case. Awesome. Okay, I'm going to move on before we run out of time. So I just wanted to fill out this like survey that the SIG Cluster Lifecycle put out for Project Health, Sub-Project Health, ahead of their annual survey that they have to fill out for all the SIGs. If anyone's interested, feel free to stay and you can watch me answer it and help me answer the questions. If you're not interested, feel free to drop off and have a great rest of your day. All right. So I'm just gonna fill it out in front of everyone and we can all like chip in with like answers. And it's not super complicated. I did it with Fabrizio yesterday for Cluster API. So project name, Cluster API provider, Azure. All right, do we have regular office hours at least every month? Yes. How many people usually attend the office hours meeting? Today we have 10. I would say between 5 and 10, probably. I don't think we ever have or rarely have more than 10. Are you keeping meeting notes in a doc shared with the SIG mailing list? Yes. Are meetings recording available publicly in the SIG playlists? Yes. In the last 6 months, did you organize any additional ad hoc meetings? Did we? I don't think so. I think we did backlog grooming release planning as part of the office hours. No. In the last 6 months, did you review, update your contributing guide? Does anyone know?
Don't think so.
5 months ago.
Yay, we win.
Yeah, we did add stuff about running tests. Did you update your project roadmap? Did we update our roadmap? I don't think so. I think we're 4 months ago. Yeah, but I don't think it's a real update. Yeah, no, we need to update that. Okay, no. Is there an onboarding and growth path for contributors in your projects? I would say yes, same as the SIG or bots.
Yeah.
Yeah. As a project, what programs do you participate in for new contributors? I don't think we've had any of those specific mentorship programs in CAPZ. Correct me if I'm wrong. Does your project have contributors from multiple companies' affiliations? Yes. Does your project have contributors from end user companies? Christian, do you consider yourself an end user company?
How do you define an end user company?
I guess in the Kubernetes sense of the thing, it's usually like the ones that are like selling Kubernetes to others, like VMware, Microsoft, Google, they're not end users. And then the ones that are using Kubernetes themselves to run applications, they are end users.
We are partially end users and our customers are end users. So maybe we can say yes.
I'll say yes. Did we review update owner files in the last 6 months? Yes, for sure. Okay, what changes did we apply to the owner's file? So I think we added that as a reviewer. And then did we remove, I feel like we removed or moved to embedder.
Yeah, I think so.
We added Cheyenne as a approver. Yeah, moved, oh, that was a year ago though. So yeah, not in the last 6 months. Okay, do we need help with any areas now? Reviews.
Yes.
What else? What do we think we need help with?
I mean, mostly that. You could always hope for more contributions, but then we would need more reviewers. So I think at this point, that's the obvious bottleneck.
Okay. What are we doing in order to increase our contributor base? All right. Good first issues. What else? Office hour, holding office hours. I think this is where we could do a bit more like code walkthroughs, pairing, that sort of stuff. Being responsive on Slack and GitHub issues. Anything else we're doing or anything we should be doing? Any ideas? No. All right, let's move on. What initiatives should be highlighted that your project is proud of? It's a chance to give shout outs. All right. What are we proud of? I think one thing I'm thinking of is enabling running tests like on Kubernetes main branch, like at head with CAPZ. That's a good one. Oh, actually, I'm going to add to this having like a crowdsourcing like issues like we did with the async or with the golint linters or with what was the other one we did this with? There's something else, but basically like having an issue where there's like a bunch of like smaller steps that we split out and we put checkboxes and people can sign up for like one or more of them. So yeah, pieces. Right. Matt, what are you proud of personally?
Well, the thing I thought of here is and definitely tell me if you disagree, but I think we do a good job with first-time contributors, helping them on Slack and helping them. But that's sort of expected for an open source project too. So I'm not sure it's unique. And you could argue we could do a better job. So I'm not really sure.
I would say mentoring new contributors, maybe.
Yeah.
Christian agrees. So let's say that. David, do you have anything you want to add in here?
No, I think those pretty much covered.
I'm going to say automating the release. I did that, but
yeah.
I'm proud of it.
Yeah,
It should be.
Yeah, it's so hard to look at these and think about what are the things you want to congratulate yourself for.
Yes. Well, who do you want to congratulate others, I guess, but yeah. All right. As a project team, how many releases have you done in the last 6 months? I don't know. How many releases have you done? 6 months is like July, June. Yeah, so 0, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. What is now stable beta alpha? All right, so APIs are beta. Code base is stable or 1.0, and then Azure machine pool and Azure managed cluster are alpha or experimental. Does that sound fair? What are some of the longer tail efforts that your project is working on? All right, so refactoring services to asynchronous, moving AKS managed clusters, experimental. I wouldn't really say we're struggling, but it's some of the things that are taking that are more like long spread initiatives. And then Azure machine pools, probably. Although we're not actively working on it in CapsD, it's more of a CAPI effort right now. Anything else that anyone can think of? Is there anything on the Windows side, James, that we should add in here?
Just general Windows support. It's a long tail.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much there, but it's more like adding features. Yeah, I'm not going to put it. Do we consider our CI signal adequate to the project maturity? Who thinks yes? Who thinks no? Thinks maybe.
I say yes. Adequate is a wishy-washy word, but
I mean, it can always be better, I think, is I'd say like yes in terms of coverage. In terms of stability, no, because we've had like a lot of flakes. So I'll say that. Coverage, no instability. Flakes.
Yeah.
Partly dependencies. As a project, do you consider your documentation adequate to the project maturity?
I think our docs are pretty good. I mostly look at the testing stuff in the dev test, but I often reference them myself. So,
Zane, what do you think? You've been looking at the docs a lot lately.
I think they're pretty good. Yeah.
All right, I guess adequate to project maturity is a tough one because it's like, right. Oh yeah, let's get this wrapped up. We're at the hour. Feel free to drop off if you have to go. I'll finish this. There's just one more page. As a project, you participate in SIG bi-weekly meetings, status updates or discussions. I think no. I've tried to go to those a while back. I haven't had time lately. I don't know if anyone else is going representing the project, but I don't think so. As a project, in which projects you interact with? Not cluster add-ons, frequently cluster API. I'd say frequently Kappa. We interact with ourselves. DigitalOcean, not really. GCP by opportunity. IBM Cloud, no. CubeMark, no. Nested, no. OpenStack, no. Packet, no. vSphere, yes, sometimes. It's the no. Image Builder, yes, a lot. Cops, no. CubeUp, no. CubeADM, yes. CubeSpray, no. Minikube, no. Okay, I already gave my suggestions to Fabrizio for yesterday's cluster API survey, but anyone have suggestions for improving the cooperation and coordination at the SIG level?
Maybe we should be discussing with the other provider implementations.
More discussions between providers. What else? Anyone else? No. These things are tough. All right. I'm going to submit unless we have any final words. Cool.
Some of them are yes, no questions, and some of them are like essay questions. So a little hard.
All right. Well, thanks everyone. It's been submitted, and have a lovely rest of your day. See y'all online.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
See ya.
Bye.